it's a combination of the Eckers and the Itters, in my opinion, so.
If you already use Eckers and Itters, then it's a lot of familiar names.
The only difference is all those ages are in one place. On those one places, those two, there's never two homes that look the same.
Never.
No, we're all very unique, so, yeah. Anything?
And I think everybody knows who we are, everybody was here. You know?
Yep. So are you guys, raise your hand if you're already using this tool to assess family homes.
Oh, wait.
Yes, yes, I am.
So what do you find most challenging?
Just the providers.
Just the tool.
Everything.
The tool, the
Yeah, no
providers.
home is this, no two homes are exactly the same.
Mhm.
And of course, the willingness of the provider
Mhm.
Yeah.
to
And ample space,
Work with.
they usually,
Yeah.
And finding strategies to meet the intent of the item can be difficult,
Uh-huh.
but different in each home.
Mhm.
Trying to figure out how to fit that in there and what works for them.
Yeah, you can't give them your canned standard language because
No.
Yeah.
their philosophies are different, their
Mhm.
environment is different, yeah. So, yeah, this is the most challenging tool, I think.
Mhm.
for sure.
Amen.
It takes, we always show, Connie and I do, because we do at least 7 or 8 different tools, I forget how many. And we're out with coaches and they're like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know, read the words. And they'll read them, I'm like, no, read all the words.
All the words.
Because this one has the ands, and it has the ors, and it has the, if you have this age, and if you don't have this age, and there's so many restrictions, and there's more indicators to score in this one. So,
You
yeah,
have to
there's-
read all
I always get
the
the, well, that's what
words.
the book says, but what do the raters really want? I'm like, what the book says.
Yes,
The
exactly.
book says.
That's a great
The-
answer.
Yeah, and I think the big piece is that really what providers want to do is meet all the requirements, but just tell me how to perform to this, and this. And it doesn't work like that. What we have to say is, okay, for you and your children and your families and your setting, what can we do about this? And so there's all this different challenge for each indicator based on where they're at. We can't just say, well, if you do this, then you'll get a 7, and if you do this, then you'll get a 6, and because it's so different, and that's why it is so challenging. And again, that's why our focus for all these tools is about the child. So if we can shift that and say, then in this situation, what would be best for the children that you're caring for, and then how can we look at that? Then we can make some difference, I think, but that's,
And also in the centers, you can coach them and say, well, this is what your director wants you to do. And they'll be like, okay, in the home, you convince them or you don't convince them. So that relationship is really different. I know, you guys, we know.
we understand too, so we feel, yeah.
So what we thought we'd do is to go over the video, talks again about scoring and a little bit more about the rationale behind the tool, and then we'll go over the hints for the FCCERS. And then, as we kind of talked about, this is your opportunity to ask questions about that. How do we get this done, and what's the best way for this? We can all share experiences of what we've seen, what works and what hasn't worked, so. All right?
Good morning. Have a good day. Bye.
Talk to me. Talk to me. Gobble, gobble. Nibble, nibble.
Family child care homes vary in many ways. Some providers integrate their family child care services into their own living areas.
I think it is another T-Rex.
How the dinosaurs is.
Others provide a child care space separate from their own living areas. And some providers combine both approaches by utilizing their own living space and a separate area.
Oh, right.
The age range of children in care also varies.
Okay, now you can play with the blocks. And
We find homes that serve only infants and toddlers.
look at that tower. Can you look at the tower that Rachel's building?
Wow, look at it. Lisa's proud of her.
Some serve infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, while others serve a wide age range. In this case, older infants through school agers. In some family child care homes, children with disabilities are included with typically developing children. There are providers who care for a small group alone,
Okay, Tim, I'm gonna wash.
some who have part-time assistance from family members, and others who hire co-workers to help them care for a larger group of children. Of course, each family child care home will also reflect the individual, cultural, and linguistic characteristics of the provider, the children being served, and their families.
Well, can we just get down your car? No problem, everybody get out.
Despite these differences, each family child care home must find its own way of meeting the needs that all children share. Their health and safety must be protected.
Good.
They need satisfying activities to promote learning.
Is that a dinosaur?
Yeah, that's nice.
Okay, an alligator.
Alligator.
Does it have something in its mouth? Teeth?
And all children need warm, supportive interaction. The Family Child Care Environment Rating Scale, Revised Edition, the FCCERS01, is an update of the original FCCERS. It is designed to be used as a reliable and valid measure of quality in the wide variety of settings found in family child care homes. This program contains a section entitled Organization and Mechanics, which provides an overview of how items are arranged and how to score an item. There is also a section entitled Observations and Practice Scoring. This section contains 8 items, which you can view in any order and as many times as you choose.
Do we need to go over the scoring? How to score? Okay, wait towards it, some of you ladies, not with that. Okay. I was thinking we were good. All right, so do you have hints?
I do. Right. So, we have something similar in this tool to the ITERS tool that we talked about. Anybody know what that might be?
Much of the day.
Match of the day. Right. So, same issues that we see for much of the day, anything different? What kinds of things do you usually see?
I guess my confusion is when you have infants or smaller toddlers with the preschoolers and with toys like manipulatives or small puzzle pieces, or how do we at home, how does much of the day work for that?
Anybody? Any experience with multi-age homes and how they
So how-
make that work?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
How we would keep the little stuff away from the.
Well, if they have the infants in with the kids playing, like they're sitting on the floor.
So it comes down not so much as far as the much of the day piece, but it's more accessibility. So it's making sure that when they have the infants, if they're, on a blanket on the floor, that they're given some bigger Duplos or some soft toys. But then if preschoolers are doing an art project, that they're maybe over in a different area and have some materials that just they can use, that maybe the provider brings down.
But if she lets the smaller toddlers around the room with all the mix of the kids and they have those things accessible.
So usually what you'll see is that the things for older children are stored higher. And then there might be areas where, say, school agers can sit at a bigger table and do smaller puzzles or play a game. Or different sized tables for those toddlers to use, where they might use the appropriate materials for art with closer supervision by the provider. So there's some different things like that happen.
Just trying to figure out, because if they mix the kids in together, the mobile toddlers, whether they're crawling or what.
Usually what we see is a mix in a home, because there's just the one provider many times. And so they do have a mix, and so then it's just, my non-mobile infant is here on a blanket having some tummy time, they can still see their peers, and I'm gonna rotate some of the materials they're playing with. I've got a couple toddlers that are mobile, that can go to dramatic play or blocks, or use this table, and I'm gonna do some bigger crayons. And then maybe I've got some preschoolers that are gonna do some cutting, or they can, again, go to those other, so it doesn't, I don't know that it's very really
So-
problematic as far as
So,
the
that's,
general.
yeah, so like, let's say you have an art bucket with scissors, preschool scissors in it, let's say for them, and it is accessible, but it's on, as long as a toddler cannot pull that shelf down, or pull that bucket down, then it is still considered accessible to the
So in
preschooler?
homes, you don't have to have everything accessible all of the time. So things like scissors can be up, but you might have bigger crayons that are down, that are generally accessible. It's gonna depend on the children that you have. So you might do art when you're able to be there with them, doing those things. And you might do more detailed art maybe when smaller children are napping or different things. So it's gonna depend on the children that you have and what accommodation you need to make. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess I'm kind of going off what you're questioning. So in ITERS, you don't have anything that can fit in a choke tube in the classroom. It's just
Right.
not there. It's not even down, so it's locked. But this family child care home, that's not true. That stuff can be there. It is, I'm just saying it has to be carefully supervised. So as long as the toddlers aren't
Right, so
getting it
if
and
the-
putting it in their mouths,
Right,
it's
so if the
okay.
scissors are a concern, then you just keep the scissors up until you're able to use the scissors with your direct supervision. So they don't have to be accessible to the children all the time, because you have toddlers who might use them inappropriately. But you might have other materials that they could use, like
There-
bigger crayons. and
There are
things like
safety
that.
scissors that don't cut
Right.
hair or anything, and like, everything that was accessible in my program was safe, would not fit in a choke tube. And big kids like to play with those things too. It's, I just made sure I had a good variety for them. And the littler things, I had like an art area And that's where we went to do that stuff. You know, little puzzles they could go in there and do on the table, it was just let them off to the corner.
Yeah, but how do you then score it for, again, that much of the day then? I mean, I don't understand if it's accessible on a shelf where you have, they maybe ask for it, the older kids.
So your
but then
infants
it's
don't
not.
need, your infants don't need art materials.
Yeah.
So they don't need to worry about much of the day for art. They just need basic like fine motor, some soft things, dolls and different things. Your older children will get that substantial portion of the day or much of the day. So that at one point, if they want to do art and all that's out is crayons and paper, that's fine. But then maybe if it's during quiet time and they wake up early, then the provider maybe gets out the collage bucket with some glue, and then their art activity can be gluing sequins on the toilet paper tubes or the cardboard tubes, so that they get more things that developmentally meet their needs.
So for this tool, when I come to a home and I'm looking at art materials, I'm gonna look at what's accessible here, but I'm also gonna look at all the things that are on this upper shelf, because those are all things that the children can use with the correct supervision, or that older children can use at a different time, at a higher table or something like that. So you're still gonna get credit for those things. What's gonna miss much of the day is when that baby is over here under the same crib gym. And then you pick him up and say something, but then he goes back under the same crib gym, and then he goes back under the same, and, you know, 6 times, this is where he ends up. So he's got access to the same things all day long and very little else. That's gonna be something that's gonna be problematic. Or, you know, toddlers can only do blocks and dramatic play. They can never get all these fine motor materials that are up here. And the other thing about much of the day is you might get much of the day in certain areas and not in other areas. So if they never have access to dramatic play, they might still have access to soft materials for much of the day, and they'd get credit there, but not in dramatic play. So there's a lot of things that fall into your consideration for your score in each item.
Yeah, so as we go through the hints, the first thing you see under the general notes is accessible, which is one of the words we were talking about. We want to see that the toddlers have materials at their developmental age accessible to them, without the lids, open containers, things that they can freely choose from, that when they're awake and able to play, that they're not restricted from using. The preschool children, yes, some of their other things that shouldn't be allowed for the other children. Accessible means they may be on the shelf, but they're in plain sight. And if they say, Miss Mary, can I play with those pom-poms or whatever, Mary should scan the room to see what the other kids are doing and say, sure, I'll bring those down for you, and put them in a safe place for them to use. That is accessible for those kids.
Like a cabinet door that they can open, that kids can open, is that
So you have to just watch, because if your toddlers can open it, then they might have access to items that are chokables.
Right.
And to make sure that kids know that they actually do have access to.
But right, it says no barriers here, so a door on a cabinet door, if the materials are behind there and they know, I prefer that they were labeled or something you could see, but they can open them, is that door considered a barrier?
Not for their access. A lot of times you'll see them access those materials while you're there,
Okay.
and that's how you know.
Okay.
And it's the same, we see that sometimes in preschool rooms too. Teachers always
Yeah,
tell
this
us,
is
oh, they know they can get
predominantly
these music materials out, but it's in a closed cabinet. And you're like, oh, okay, sure. But sometimes you'll see the kids open that and take things out during the observation. You're like, okay, they do know that they can get those out, but that's not always the case. So the other thing about homes is that you might start the day upstairs in the living room, and then you might move downstairs to the basement where they have a bigger play area, and then at the end of the day, maybe they're back up in the living room. So what do they have access to in those different spaces, and for how long, how much time of their day? Because there may be more limited materials that they have access to in that living area upstairs, as opposed to the one downstairs.
So that's another place where your much of the day can come into play. So for example, just for a second, I'll get to your question. The programs that start upstairs in the morning, let's say the provider is greeting, so they do breakfast, and they greet, and maybe they get books, and they wait for everyone to get there before they go downstairs for school time. Well, if the provider opens her home at 6 o'clock, there could be children there from 6 until maybe 8:30, till everyone arrives, and all they had access to was breakfast and books. So they're gonna not be able to meet that much of the day piece for all of those other developmental items and activities because they're not represented upstairs. And that was active time where the children were awake, able to play, and didn't have access to materials.
Okay.
Any question?
So to piggyback off of that, so if the time throughout the course of the day, say that provider's open from 6 to 6, and she discloses that she's, you know, breakfast and books from 6 to 8:30 in the morning, and then, you know, books and story time from, you know, 4:30 to 6 at night,
Yep.
she is completely blown her much of the day.
Except for maybe books.
Except for maybe books, yeah.
Right,
It's
because
just
you
about
think they'd
everything.
have downstairs and upstairs.
Right,
Right.
okay, that's what I wanted to just double check.
So
But
is
what
that-
what
so-
we'll more often see is some other things, but maybe a limited amount.
Right.
So they have to consider that.
So then as a coach, how do you work with the provider to have them get better access for their children for much of the day? What do you say to them?
Because they want to be upstairs, because they don't want to leave
Stuff
their door
upstairs.
open, they want to be able to greet the parents.
Well, then they would just have the limit, they would just have that kind of that laundry basket,
Right.
a couple of things that are, you know.
And they don't need the whole, they don't need the
Right.
whole laundry list of it all. But
Right.
if they have one or two fine motor,
Some
a
soft
set of blocks,
items.
a doll and some clothes, or a prop box for dramatic play.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then it depends on the age of the children that they have, because they want to be offering something that's engaging to all of the children. So there's that.
Because we know that special works for a provider, because it's not realistic to have them downstairs and every time the door rings, they have to go up and then they're either what, dragging the kids up and down the stairs, or they're leaving them unsupervised. So the best case scenario is to figure out how they can meet those needs and put the materials up and down for them. Or whatever the scenario, that's a typical scenario.
Yeah, whenever they use multiple spaces, it's always challenging. So there's a lot of brainstorming that goes on with this school to try and figure out what the best thing is. So.
Again, hand washing is the same, it doesn't change, they need to wash upon arrival, 20 seconds, the same practice, all of that is the same. The hand washing posters, the website is listed there for you. The tool does define the different age groups of infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and school agers. And that's something that will be asked at the beginning of the observation. That just helps to clue the assessor in as far as what age materials they're looking for. Do I need to be looking for infant stuff? If so, then I can just put that out of my head. Do they not have school agers? Then I don't have to worry about looking for chapter books and those more advanced games, etc. So just gives you the mindset of what toys to look for and materials for the children. And it is what age children are enrolled, not just who is there for the day. So, you know, often the school agers are there maybe before and after, but if they're enrolled in their program, then materials need to be accessible in the home in some form or fashion. All right, the next part talks about much of the day. I think we kind of drilled that one.
Yep. Through a lot of that, and it's the same thing as far as wait time. So if we're waiting for hand washing, if we're waiting, you know, to go outside, all of those times again are still the wait times, and we're still gonna be looking at those. So those routines and having activities and things, having a plan for that is important in the homes as well.
So, you know, if they're getting ready to go outside and that's when everyone is cleaned up and the provider says, oh, I have to change the baby.
Yeah.
And she makes all the kids wait instead of having a little bit of forethought and giving the children, you know, in 5 minutes we're gonna clean up. Then she goes to change the baby or has the materials right there. Then the baby's ready, then they can all clean up. They avoided that whole waiting period.
So if she provides something for them to do, like, oh, here's some pages and crayons, well, I'll have to change the
Right,
pages.
as long as they're engaged in the activity.
Well, then-
Yeah, and it can be harder, you know, in homes when you have that, because generally, everybody's waiting for the one toilet, everybody's waiting for the one sink, you know, because
Yeah.
it's the home, and so so if you can do anything to help those routines, it's
And some of them are waiting for the one provider to help them.
Right, exactly, so there are all those things.
So was, I'm gonna get the supervision. Go ahead.
We will get there.
So then on page 2, we didn't talk about this in the other tools, but it references the sum and many. You'll see that a lot as you're going through the tool and scoring, where it references some usually means at least one example observed. Many, of course, means more than one.
This is where reading all the words is important, because sometimes some will mean something else, but if it does, it will tell you that. So don't assume that it means more than one. Think it probably means more than one, but let me read all the words and make sure in this indicator that's what it means, because it might say some means 3 in this case. So read all your words.
Can we go back up to the cranky baby?
Sure.
I just currently have this situation. So if a provider has a cranky baby and they carry that baby like all of the time, this provider in particular wants to wear the baby. That's a much of the day restriction.
And there's a
she said that
difference between a cranky baby and a cranky baby every day. Because what's going on with the baby that they're cranky every single day?
She says that the baby, and I haven't asked, nor do I think I could, ask her, is there a doctor's note for that? But she says he has colic, and the only way he won't cry is if he's held all day. And I personally had a baby like that, so I'm like, that could be true. So would a doctor's note say that baby did have colic and it was best, I guess?
I don't
For
think
them to
we
be
really even
warm?
go to that. What we say is if the child is awake and ready to play, it's that same thing. But my suggestion would be to try sometimes to put the baby down to play, and then if that didn't work, then to pick the baby up and go ahead and give it. I would suggest that they are occasionally trying
Thank you.
to see.
Because you think as an outside source, if we just see that baby being
I
held all
know,
the day,
that's
you're
what my
thinking,
concern was too.
you're thinking that's the providers wants that.
Mhm.
But if they're at least trying to say, oh, do you want to play with this? And the baby pitches a fit, and they say, okay, like bring him back and say, oh, well, now we're gonna go outside. Do you want to play? No, baby pitches a fit. Then you can kind of, I mean, we developmentally know, and you can kind of say, well, they're really not, they're
Okay.
not having
We've
it
seen
today.
that in centers too,
For
where
whatever
not
reason.
necessarily where they would wear the baby, but they would hold the baby a lot, but usually you can tell, 45 minutes in, that baby is teething and they're not having it today. And they're gonna need that comfort, so.
Okay, thanks for the clarity on that.
Yeah.
So then when we move to many generally is talking about at least 3 to 5 of whatever it is. So if we're talking about books, then 3 to 5 of each of those things. If we're talking about nature and science, then 3 to 5 of each of the categories that it's talking about. So as we go through those different things, many is usually that varied components and things. So when we're talking about family homes, we're thinking about infants and toddlers. Do they have toys like rattles and graspers that are appropriate for infants? And then do they have more complex things for toddlers, like shape sorters and things like that? And then for preschoolers, do they have some puzzles and maybe different levels of puzzles? And then for the school agers, what kind of fine motor activities do they have, more of those small building, Legos and different things? So we're looking for those different categories, and then it'll be that 3 to 5 for whichever age groups you're looking for, generally for many.
All right, so the other piece that comes up in this tool especially is supervision. There are those times where the provider has to go potty. It happens.
And they generally won't do that when you're doing an observation, official observation, they just don't.
But it's life.
But I'm sure they want to. And if it was just their coach, they might. So it's okay if they do.
But for supervision, there are a few momentary lapses where providers are allowed to be out of sight from the children. The exception to that is infants must always be under direct supervision. I think toddlers too.
Well, I think so, but.
And children should never be unsupervised while they're outside.
So if they're changing an infant on the floor, they got the pad and all this, they're doing it correctly, but the preschoolers on the other side of a couch,
So preschoolers, you just need to be able to hear them and check on them. So if you're just changing
so
the
she doesn't need to
diaper.
drag everything into the middle of the preschools to change the infant.
Now, as long as she can hear them, and if there's a scuffle or an uproar, she says, oh, what's going on over there? I'll be over there in a minute. Are you guys sharing your toys?
And then probably best practice is just to make sure they're not doing things like water play and
Eating.
things that would be very, very hazardous if maybe they didn't have some supervision. So there's that piece. You know, usually you're gonna leave them in a safe activity.
And I just want to clarify again, sorry to be the squeaky wheel.
No.
But within vision for an infant does not count like a video camera
Correct,
No.
thingy.
correct. It
Perfect.
isn't a substitute for direct supervision.
Just one,
Yeah.
thanks.
When they're napping, can they be out of sight?
I did